Howdy doody buckaroonies, and welcome back to another episode of Wine 30, the show with real talk and really good wine. And in keeping with the usual theme of the show of not actually drinking wine, I've got a glass of bourbon, so why don't you sit down, join me, take off your pants, settle in, and let's me and you have a little chat. Before I sat down to film this, my wife actually suggested an alternative name for the show, which is Whiskey Business, which I thought was hilarious, so maybe we'll change the name of the series to Whiskey Business when I drink whiskey and talk about music business stuff. So today's video is all about some music business and music industry stuff, which is a little bit different from the content I typically post on the channel, but I do hope you enjoyed and I do hope you find stuff like this helpful. And if you enjoy videos like this and you would want more of them, maybe let me know down in the comments because I'd be happy to make them. Today's video is all about 5 of the biggest lessons I've learned in my time in the music industry. I've been involved in the music industry now for the better part of a decade, and I've done a lot of different things during that relatively short amount of time. It has been a long and very weird journey to get to where I am today, and I'm still learning a lot every day as I go along, and I figured I would maybe share a little bit of advice with you guys because I know some of you are looking to get into a career in the music business or already are in a career in the music business, so if I can help you guys in any way, and especially help you avoid making the same stupid mistakes I did, I think that's definitely content worth making. First up, rule number 1 for music, and I guess for life in general, always be the nicest guy in the room. In my time in the music industry, and especially as my path has grown to doing this professionally, I have met and worked with a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life. And there's one thing that's always kind of stuck out to me that's common no matter kind of what stage of my career and path I was at, and that is that there are some people who are incredibly gifted and incredibly smart and just amazing, one-of-a-kind people at what they do, but they're assholes, and that is one of the biggest handicaps to what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish, and it's just a weird mistake to see people making. One of the things I was told early on by kind of a music mentor of mine is something kind of funny, and he said, talent will only get you so far, and you have no idea how incredibly true that statement is. I have met and worked with some truly brilliant minds, and it's really funny to see the people who are just maybe mean or have this weird sense of entitlement or superiority, and you can see that it's really stifled their growth and their potential in the industry. If you can be the person that people want to hang out with or get a beer with or whatever, that is going to get you a lot farther because that's going to make you be the person who gets the call. If you're someone who's snotty and entitled and you think you're the best and everyone should be thanking you for your time and whatever, you're probably not gonna get the call. If you are a shitty person and you're bad to work with, it's not gonna serve you well. But it's funny because beyond that, you also just don't know how being a decent person and a person who is good to work with can pay you back, because you don't know who goes on to become someone. If you are kind of a jerk to someone who you think is just some insignificant pawn that's below you, and 5 years later they end up doing some really big thing, you really have no connection there. And that's happened to me several times. It's been people who I guess at the time think have an impression of being maybe not someone who's really going anywhere, but then it turns out they start making some really big moves later on, and you would really be surprised at how often that happens. Another big part of this is that the music industry as a whole is a lot smaller of a place than you think it is. People talk and word gets around very quickly. This is something I've really started to benefit from myself, in that when I work with people and I do a good job, or people like working with me or whatever, they tell someone they know who knows someone they know who does this thing, who knows someone who runs a thing or whatever, and then they end up contacting me. Or on the inverse, I've known people who have done something stupid and it's burned their entire career to the ground before it even really took off. The biggest takeaway of all of rule number 1, though, I think is just in general, don't be an asshole. And I think that's a really good rule for the music business and for life in general. So I will drink to that. Lesson number 2 of Cameron's time in the music industry. If all else, you learned what not to do. And this is one of, I think, the best things my dad has ever said to me. One night when I was maybe 16 or so, my dad and I were in Nashville, and I don't really remember why we were there, but he said, hey, let's go out to a couple of different little bars and whatever to check out the live music scene. Because, of course, I, being a musician at the time and being someone who wanted to get into music, my dad wanted to help kind of expose me to what that was like and see, what other bands were out there. What's it like to play in Nashville? Because that was kind of a big goal of mine. We went out to a couple different places, and towards the end of the night, we ended up at this little hole-in-the-wall bar. And this was probably one of the most fundamentally shaping experiences of my music career and my life so far. We walk into this bar, and there's an acoustic duo playing. Just two guys, two guitars, to a pretty small room. There's maybe 10 people in here in total. And something about this really set me off in a weird way, because these guys were putting on a very bad show, and it was very quick for my dad and I to pick up on kind of that energy of just the weird vibe in the room. And I thought that was really interesting. Throughout these guys' set, you could tell that they felt like they deserved better, and they shouldn't be playing at some hellhole bar in some random off street of Nashville, and they deserved to be big stars, and you weren't worth their time to play to. And the way they talked to the crowd was very belittling and very weird, and they were trying to just make these jokes that didn't land, and you can tell they weren't reading the room or even being into it. It was weird that they were just going through the motions and not trying to do their job, which is just provide some entertainment and, give people some music to enjoy, which was really, really odd. My dad and I ate something, and then we walked out and we were walking back down the street, and I remember looking to my dad and saying, "Man, that was really weird. Those guys were not very good, and I don't think the people in there liked them." And my dad turned to me and said, "You know what? If all else, you learned what not to do. Those guys put on a terrible show, and now you know to never do that and never act like that." And that has been something that has served me so well in my life, in that whenever I make a mistake, which is inevitable, and I'm sure you will make many mistakes as well, it's just a fact of life, beyond music, just life in general. As long as you use the negative experience as a positive in order to learn something and put something in action and just remember what went wrong or whatever it is, that will serve you very well. I've worked a lot of different gigs. I've done a good job. I've done a bad job. I've worked with really great clients. I've worked with really horrible clients. I've made some really stupid mistakes, and things just happen. But every time something happens, whatever it is, if I'm maybe mixing a song and the mix kind of sounds like garbage, I always keep that in mind, that if all else, I have learned what not to do. And as long as I can make a conscious effort to attempt to recognize what went wrong, then even though it may have not worked out, it was time that was ultimately well spent. That brings us to thing number 3. Don't bother with label showcases, talent agents, repost chains, or anything like that, because it is simply useless and not worth your time. I am not embarrassed to admit that in my younger days, I wasted a huge amount of money and time pursuing things like these label showcases and big opportunities and talent agents and booking agents and managers and artist representatives and all of these other things that were just ultimately stupid scams. And you know what? I took something away from it, from knowing that these things are just a waste of time. If instead of doing these things, I had spent that money and time and effort on my own projects and trying to further things directly myself, with myself being the one handling things, it would have worked out a lot better. And that is just a plain and simple fact. Early on, when I was in bands, the whole label showcase scene especially was just this huge thing where it was like a talent show, and there were going to be top A&R executives there and whatever, and the bands I was in would buy into these things and perform at them, and it was a huge waste of time and effort and just something that's stupid, and it's just designed to take advantage of people and musicians and artists that simply don't know any better. As I'm sure you're aware, the music industry is full of scumbags and dirtbags and sleazy idiots, but that's a fact of life, and you do have to be aware of it. It's just something you have to ask yourself. If you're going to trust someone, especially if there's money on the table, is this someone you actually know and trust, or is this someone who could just be trying to make a quick buck? A lot of these repost chains and A&R networks and label executives and whatever are typically lower middle level ex-executives who worked at some has-been record label, who work at Domino's part-time, who saw a way to take advantage of people based off some connection they had at one point. So let me just tell you right now, these people don't really do anything and probably don't know anything or anyone. They just did one thing one time and need to make some money off that because they can't make money any other way. One great example of this: one time I was in a band and we went to play a Battle of the Bands show, and the winner of this Battle of the Bands got a 6-month booking contract, I believe $5,000 or $10,000 or something along those lines, and an interface opportunity to audition to play at a major local festival. We went to this battle of the bands, as did just about every other band in the area. We all played, blah, 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 and I got to the finals in my band. We were very, very excited, and we were super sure that we were going to win. On the night of the finals, here's what happened. We played our best, people loved us, as usual. The other band played, did a great show, not really anything against this band. Then it turns out the other band won. And based on the reading of the room, something just felt a little off. And maybe it was just internal bias, but I felt like we did better, and I feel like we should have won. I later came to find out that this entire event was put on by that band's management agency, so it was really just a designed event for this bar to get a bunch of local musicians playing every weekend for free in order to fill out their event calendar, and this band was going to win all along. So that's just a cautionary tale. I'm not saying that's how everything works, but trust me, a lot of these events are simply a waste of your time, and you're better off striking out on your own. Another big takeaway of this lesson, and a phrase I've heard tossed around a lot over the years, is you don't find a manager finds you. This is something that I think a lot of people don't want to talk about because it's kind of uncomfortable, and honestly, I felt really kind of insecure about this stuff early on. I felt like I needed a manager to be a serious person, and I needed a booking agent, and I needed all this stuff, and I needed this to, I don't know, give myself some kind of weird validity. I don't really understand why I felt this huge drive to have these things because they're just useless. A lot of the times you want to have something to show for all your effort you've put in, and it's uncomfortable to admit that you really don't, and that is not your fault. That's just a fact of how the music industry works anymore. I really wanted a manager, and I ended up paying managers to manage me, and that was useless because they had no financial stake in it. They got a check and life moved on. I paid a PR company once to help promote a band's record. I was in a band and we paid this PR company a bunch of money, and guess what? It was useless. It was just something to make myself feel better, and all I was doing was throwing money away to feel like I had made something of myself. And I really hope that you don't make that same mistake. You can do these things on your own, and it's going to be much better for you. Ultimately, in the music business, there are a lot of people who want a share of the pot and want to get their hands in the pot when it comes to your income and your music and things like that. You should always read things before signing, you should always double check things, and you should always ask yourself, is there really a benefit to this relationship? Ultimately, the best takeaway from all this kind of stuff is simply, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Takeaway number 4 is another uncomfortable lesson that I think we all need to hear. Getting discovered doesn't exist. If I could go back and give myself one big piece of advice, and I guess advice to anyone who is kind of in the earlier stages of all this music career stuff, is stop planning to do things and just start doing them. In my earlier years as a musician and whatnot, I wanted to sit there and plan things out, and I had a plan to plan a plan about planning a plan to plan a plan about planning to plan a plan. And I had all these grand ideas, and I wasted so much time sitting there thinking about all the things I was gonna do one day instead of getting out there and just fucking doing it. As people have said for many years in the music industry, you simply need to get out there and pay your dues. You've got to sludge your way through the bullshit, and that is what is going to teach you how to function and be a successful person in this industry. It is hard work, it's a lot of work, and early on, it really, 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 really sucks. Instead of sitting there trying to make phone calls and send emails and do all this stuff, just get out there and actually start doing something. Stop trying to get discovered. Stop throwing stuff out there and hoping it works. Just get out there and start promoting yourself and put things in motion instead of waiting on other people to do it for you. One of the other big things I find is that once you start to find some degree of success, it's often a very self-feeding machine. Especially in my case, once I started to get my music out there, I started to see my music get used in a lot more YouTube videos and independent film projects and other stuff like that, and especially with my YouTube channel. Once I started to get my YouTube channel out there and things started to grow, I started getting more work, and that work started giving me more work, and next thing I know, I was able to quit my job and do this music stuff and YouTube stuff full time. And it took a long time to get there. It really, really did. And that will kind of lead us into our next point. It really just was not an overnight thing, but one of the big takeaways from all this, I guess, is just that you can't expect to throw out some random EP that you worked on up on SoundCloud or whatever and think that you're gonna get this huge amount of recognition and whatever, or this huge label contract, because that's simply not how it works. You need to put your stuff out there, and you need to use the tools available to you to make your efforts known, because there are a lot of people out there who want this job and this career more than anything, and you have to be willing to want it just that little bit more. If I had one word of advice, especially to those of you who are a bit younger, I'm not that old myself, but I kind of feel like an old guy by today's standards. I'm only 27 as of the time of making this video, but there are so many tools available to people nowadays. It's frustrating. I wish I had the tools available nowadays that people do, you know, TikTok and all that kind of stuff that is just huge, and it's a great tool to promote your music, and I wish I had that when I started out. I didn't get, you know, this huge internet sphere of things we have today. And if you can sit down and make an effort to capitalize on that, to start promoting your music and getting it out there, you will find some form of success. I absolutely guarantee that. You have all the tools in the world. You just have to be willing to sit down and use them. That brings us to the end of this video with point number 5. Your journey is your own. One of the weirder questions I get asked a lot is, what am I doing wrong? Or what should I be doing differently? And this is something that really gets to me and is a really frustrating question to answer, because I feel like it's really weird to have to say that you shouldn't ever let anyone tell you you're doing this wrong, because everyone's story is so completely different. I mean, if there was some kind of magic success recipe for being awesome musicians and whatever, we would all be doing it, and we would all be huge #1, triple, quadruple platinum selling acts and whatever, but it just doesn't work that way. Producer envy is a real thing, and it is something I kind of want to make another video about at some point, just to talk about, I don't know, producer envy in general and why it's just kind of stupid. But you will likely receive a lot of weird and unsolicited advice of people telling you you're doing things wrong, or here's what you should be doing, or you're stupid, or you're just not understanding it, or you're just not good enough, and that is just bullshit. With that in mind, if you feel that someone is telling you that you are doing things wrong or whatever, feel free to send them this timestamp in the video so I can personally tell them. One thing I think that people have to understand when it comes to this rule is that success is ultimately relative. That's also a big thing for music at large. You know, everyone's story is different, and everyone's version of success is entirely relative. Another big lesson of this, and this is especially personal for me, is that you likely won't end up where you expect. When I was younger, I was a guitar player. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to play guitar, I wanted to be in a band, and I wanted to play rock and roll really, really, really damn loud. And my plan, I kid you not, was to move to Nashville with guitar strings and banana chips. I always told my stepmom that, and I was mad as hell. I was telling her, you know what? You know, this town is too little of a fishbowl for me. I'm moving to Nashville with guitar strings and banana chips, and I'm gonna show all of you what was wrong and whatever. And if you had told me at that time that I would end up doing YouTube videos, doing sound design, working with, you know, some of these huge companies I get to work with, and, you know, having a really deep interest in like sound design and synthesis and synthesizers in general. I hated synthesizers when I was at this phase of my life. You know, if you had told me all that, I would have been like, yeah, right, whatever, dude, and like, you know, flipped my sick haircut and walked away into the sunset like an idiot. The biggest piece of advice I think that I am qualified to give anyone, I guess, if all else, is that you should simply follow the journey and enjoy the ride. I wasted way too much time, way too much time being pissed off and mad because I feel like I wasn't doing things right and I wasn't good enough and I wasn't where I should be, especially when comparing myself to some of my peers or other people I knew. And you know what? That is still something I honestly still kind of struggle with from time to time, but it's gotten a lot better. And I feel like I've gotten a lot better at managing that. And that's kind of why I want to make maybe some kind of producer envy video in the future. But you know what? You've just got to accept it and roll with it, because if you're not having fun, Why are you doing it? So hey, cheers to you, for those of you who made it to the end of this here rant. What advice would you give? What lessons have you learned? Any epic failures you would like to share with the rest of us or whatever? Sound off in the comments down below. So thank you for watching, as always. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If you want more videos like this one, maybe let me know down in the comments below. I'd be happy to make more episodes of this series because I like ranting and I do like drinking. So guess that does it for this one. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon.